I was born in Kedah, but I consider myself as a Penang. And I left Penang in 1964. I was 71 3 days ago.
I think
You have everyone?
Yes.
Can't hear?
The two genitals.
we are not as
Alright, okay. 3 days ago, I was 71.
wow.
When I put on Facebook, 71st. And I said, oops. Okay, this is a paper. This is a presentation from a paper that I wrote in 2007. I was asked to write on early Malaysian cinema or a book on early Asian cinema to be edited by Nick Yocampo, a filmmaker and scholar in the Philippines. And Indiana University Press is supposed to publish the book. They dragged their feet. Finally, it's going to be published next year. 120th anniversary of cinema. And of course, it has undergone a lot of changes. I added a couple of other things. And what I will be showing is actually not in the paper, but I think you'll be quite interesting. Right one, huh? Okay, Wayang Kulit and cinema of shadows and the shadowy. So we know who has seen Wayang Kulit. I'm sure everybody has seen Wayang Kulit, isn't it? Joe, you haven't seen? The first film screening in the Nusantara was in Singapore in 1897. 3 months later, it was shown at the Selangor Club for just a select few people. And 3 days later, it was shown in Petaling Street, and everybody ran behind the screen. They thought it was Wayang Kulit. Today we laugh, but at that time, nobody had ever seen film before. So it was reported in the Malay Mail. I went through the Malay Mail, and that's something that I got out. So, a number of animation films have been inspired by Wayang Kulit. The technique that is being used is called silhouette animation. And the first one, notably, is called The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, done by Lothar Reiniger, an animator in Germany in 1926. Who was inspired by Chinese Shadowy. And then all the rest up to there. And this one is actually an art installation, projected pictures, and the animator herself goes behind the screen and interacts with the animation. So it was actually an installation. So when I was asked to curate animation film festival in Stuttgart, Germany, one of the biggest animation festivals, I had to cajole her to give me about a 5-minute segment because she said I had to present it. I said no money. So she managed to give it about 5 minutes. Beautifully done. Go to the internet and type Miwa Matrayek. M-I-W-A Matrayek. Okay? And then, of course, I'm going to show you later. And this one called Sankara Wade. This is the latest Star Wars using Wayang Kulit by my friend Tin Toy Cho. And in feature films, Shadowy has made an appearance, notably in To Live, where see the man who's standing there with the Chinese Wayang Kulit in the back. It is to show that just like in Padre Panchali, where the husband wants to write for theatre, but the wife tells him, when we move to the town, you are a Brahmin, you can say prayers and you can get money. Oh no. So similar story, and finally he realizes his mistake. Then the year of living dangerously, about the hidden hands that are manipulating things during Sukarno's time. And then Harry Potter had a 4-minute segment of animation that was beautifully done. And in Malaysia, it was Perempuan Melayu Terakhir, which had shadow play. I don't think the filmmaker really understood what she was doing. But after that, when we saw Wayang by Dr. Hatta Azad Khan, for the first time, Wayang Kulit was on the screen. And in Bunohan, it was a couple of years ago, where the puppeteer is killed by his own son. And there's a scene where we see the house, the window is lighted, the son is standing on the left side, the father is standing on the right side. So it's almost like seeing Wayang Kulit. I mean, it's unreal. But the best ever film made using shadows, referring to the shadow play, is Johnny Became Film, a film that was never finished. So later I'm going to expand on this. So here's a quotation from Wordsworth. The purpose of the presentation today is for you, for the eye, you, to perceive. Perceive means just not to look, but to go deeper, so that you will really enjoy. Enjoy here means not just emotionally, but also intellectually. That you understand what it's all about. And the whole idea is for you to be a bit film literate. And I hope after the session today, you will not be your former self anymore. Because I'm going to reveal a lot of secrets. I've done this all over the world, at NTU in Singapore, at a university in Norway, in Sudan, in India, and many places, and they were all surprised that actually it was so easy to understand film. So because I've never studied film formally, I made a lot of mistakes, but those mistakes helped me to understand even better. So in any good story, you have not only text, but you have subtext. So all these things, they are basically the same thing. Foreground story is what you see. Background story is the real intention of the filmmaker, and he hides it. Where does the subtext reside? It resides in the text. There's a Malay pantun. Pucuk paku selera paku, pucuk paku condong ke seberang. Lihat aku pandang aku lindung di tempat yang terang. If you hide in a dark place, of course people cannot see. But here the person is hiding right somewhere, right in front of you, but yet you cannot see. So this is the thing that we have to nurture and learn, so that when you see a work of art, whatever it is, you will understand more or less the intent. Because what you see is not what he wants to get across. Okay? For instance, the life of Pi. What is it really about? It is an expressionist approach towards getting across something which is Ang Lee's anger at Hollywood. So he's thumbing his nose at Hollywood. The title is Hollywood. Pi is Ang Lee himself. And you see the sea is like a mirror. You will never see the sea like that. Therefore, it's expressionist. So Wayang Kulit as proto-cinema. It is accepted in the West that Wayang Kulit is the earliest example of cinema. I will expand in a short while. So it is designated by UNESCO as the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So all over the world, we have Wayang Kulit in Turkey, in the Middle East, in France, China, right down to the Nusantara. And the word comes from Wayang, which means shadow in Malay. But according to Eki Imanjaya in Indonesia, who has also done similar research, he says that it also means spirit, soul, ghost, or even imagination. Why imagination? When you see someone in silhouette, you can imagine the person thing to be either like this, like that, you know, but you are never sure. So according to Dr. Gauss Nasaruddin from Penang, he said that the Malay traditional theatre, like Wayang Kulit, Bangsawan, what else, Mat Yong, Randai, whatever, there is a microcosm of the Malay cosmology formed from animistic Hindu and Islamic beliefs. There is a constant need to maintain the well-being of the community and preserve the cosmic and metaphysical psyche of the Malay. If you look at the recent happenings among a certain community, I'm sure you can guess who they are, you'll find that they have strayed so far from what is being said here. And that is the problem. So the dark side has come to the surface, overcoming the positive side. Nothing is happening. Okay, keep on. Okay. So in the film Bunuhan, you can see wayang kulit not only being performed, but it is also used in healing ceremonies. So in the film, we have this old man trying to heal. And in the opening film, you'll see two men standing by the sea and trying to heal the land. But there are two capitalists walking in front. So no way it's going to happen. So the film, on one level, is about Malaysian cinema. On another level, is about capitalism taking over in Malaysia. And at the end, there is no hope. So that's what the director feels about what is happening in Malaysia. So in Java, in Bali, performances are also sacred. Part of many ceremonies in village and family temples, and they are not only instructive in the stories, they also entertain, and they are also very, very religious. And to understand Java, you have to understand the sacred wayang, and so on and so on. That the left is always in conflict with the right, forces of light and darkness, and so on and so on. So I'll expand later on this. So the character of the shadow, according to Sunan Kalijaga, who is one of the 9 saints of Java, he used Wayang Kulit to convert people, the Hindus, to Muslim. And he said, the Wayang is indeed a reflected image of the law, the Sharia. The Wayang represents all humanity. The Dalam is Allah, creator of the universe. The Wayang figures cannot move of their own accord, but depend on the will of the Dalam. Dalam is the puppeteer. Thus, also the creatures can only act by the will of the Lord, the highest, He who manipulates the world. There's a lot more to this, and I don't think I can say more of this. I might have a problem. So, I'll come back to that. Now, Ibn Arabi, the greatest of the Sufis, is called the Sheikh of all sheikhs. You know who are Sufis? Okay, I'm a practicing Sufi for 40 years. That's why I was able to understand this, because many Dalam were my acquaintances, and when they told me, I could understand what it's all about, but they could not theorize. So because I knew psychology and what Carl Jung was talking about, the shadow and so on, I began to fit things together. So Ibn Arabi said that people who by their actions conceal the absolute behind the curtain of their own selves. This is his own interpretation, not the interpretation by the ulama as to the verse there in the Quran. Those who cover and veil, like say kafaru, means unbeliever. But his interpretation is not that. And said it depicts the generations of mankind who behave according to God's will and predestination. This will take too long to explain, but let's move on to and see what Carl Jung has to say. It's more familiar to us. So he said the shadow is an archetype, one that exists in all of us that must be confronted to attain self-awareness. He also said that archetypes are components of the collective unconscious and serve to organize, direct, and inform human thought and behavior. Archetypes are characters, are events, are rituals that recur through all time. For example, when we have a university convocation, everybody dresses in a long robe, walk very solemnly, and then there is this ceremony and so on. It's just a repeat of what happened in ancient days, where you are very formal, you have to do things according to certain rules and so on. Then we also have the archetypes of father, mother, son, daughter, and this recurs through the centuries, and we are known by the roles we play in society. And if you are a writer, if you don't use names, but use these roles that are being played, you'll find it easier to write a story, and I will expand a bit more on that. So in Star Wars, you see a lot of archetypes. So one reason that Star Wars touched all of us immensely was because of the full use of archetypes, which are the hero, the crony, jester, wizard, ally, mentor, hero. So these are the roles being played by the characters. It makes it easy to understand. So Obi-Wan Kenobi wears white, long beard, long hair. He looks very wise. Compare him to Darth Vader, whose face we cannot see. So you can see this contrast. So this is how Hollywood has been able to reach out to the whole world with their films. So the hero evolved from the Ramayana, where we have an archetypal hero, the hero who will never do any wrong. So today we have all kinds of heroes. Unlikely hero, reluctant hero, what do you call the anti-hero, the trickster hero. And today we have the trickster hero coming to the fore a lot. So we'll come to that soon. So in stories, I'm sure you know about Plato's cave. So I don't want to go too detailed. It's about a group of people, it's by Plato, a group of people who are chained to the wall of a cave, and then the shadow that they are seeing on the wall, they think that is reality. So the philosopher, the guy who can think, the hero, he understands that these are actually shadows and they are not real. And at the end, he has a process of enlightenment and is able to see the truth, which is outside and not inside. So in a 3-act story, which is a very basic way of telling stories, I have broken down into simple form. A group of people chained to a cave wall all their lives face a blank wall. The people watch projected shadows by things passing in front of a fire behind them. So they ascribe forms to these shadows. They think the shadows are this and this. And it is as close to the prisoners as to getting to view reality. But the hero must awaken from this dream called life, must break those bonds, to become aware of the web that are influencing and moving him to do things which is against his will. And finally, the hero sees the truth for what it truly is, which is the sun and the world outside the cave. So, Act 1 is the hero's ordinary world. So when you are watching a movie, the first half an hour is where the hero is in his ordinary world. This is based on Joseph Campbell's theory of the hero's journey, which is being used 100% by Hollywood or any genre films. In Act 2, he must enter a world which he is not familiar, where he is forced to do things that he will never do in his ordinary world. And then he has the trials and tribulations, and at the end, he has to come back to his ordinary world. But now he is a different person because of all that he has experienced. But is he the same person? So if he does not transform, he will be fated to either die or relive the whole thing again. So this is not a true hero, we call him a false hero. And there are 3 films called The Gladiator, Tom Hanks' gangster film where he dies at the end. Anybody remember that?
Road to Perdition. Road to Perdition.
Sorry?
Road to Perdition.
Road to Perdition, yes. And Braveheart. It follows exactly the same plot structure. The hero at the end will die. Why? Because he does not listen to the mentor and he does not transform. He holds on to revenge. But if a hero transforms, at the end, he will achieve his personal objective and the objective in the plot. That's how you tell stories that are meaningful at the end. So stories are all about how men should live their lives. This is what Aristotle said 2,500 years ago. So it's actually very, very complex. Now, Joseph Campbell talked about a monomyth, the one I was telling you just now. That is a classic sequence of actions that get repeated again and again, and when you watch Hollywood movies at one time, you knew exactly what was going to happen at the end. But today, it has become very complex. The hero is no more the good guy, he may be the bad guy, and slowly he begins to see that the world is different and he too must change. But the way they make him change. It's very different today as compared to before. So stories can be plot driven or character driven. Plot driven means first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But character driven stories are what happens in the mind of the character drives the story. Today Hollywood uses both. So according to Leo Tolstoy, the best stories don't come from good versus bad, as we have experienced for 100 years, but from good versus good. That's the way to tell great stories today. So let's look at the shadow as a means for transformation. So the film noir, I assume you know what is film noir, the surreal and the gothic. Film noir was a sub-genre of the gangster films in the 40s and 50s, and it was during the war and just after the war. We saw films that were in black and white. That had chiaroscuro, very contrast lighting. The hero will be in the shadows, or people will be mostly in the shadows, and we do not know who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. The bad guy looks like sometimes okay, but the good guy also seems to be a bad guy. So it was a period of uncertainty during the war and just after the war. And writers began to express themselves, their inner the conflict that they have. So the dark side, according to Carl Jung, if it is not controlled, leads to destruction. So it could be physical, emotional, or psychological. So there you see two visuals of people, either they are in silhouette or their faces are in shadow. This is how film noir and in the surrealism and in the gothic. So gothic, I'll come to that in a short while. So according to Aristotle, the stories that we are watching is about how we should live our lives. So basically films are about either humanity or the non-humanity of man. This is mostly the kind of film that you will see. And heroes in a story, they need mentors because they will enter the extraordinary world where they don't have any experience. So they must learn new things. So the mentor will appear and tell him, like in Chinese Kung Fu movies, he will learn from a master. And the master will give him a word of advice, but he will forget it. And at the end, at the darkest hour when he's almost going to be killed, suddenly he sees the image of the master, and the master gives his word of wisdom and is able to defeat. But of course, people will laugh if you're doing that kind of thing again today. But humans. So the session today is not just about shadows, it's also about all of us. That today when you leave this hall, you will take back something that will be of benefit to you. That's the hero's journey. The hero goes on the journey and comes back with something of benefit to society. So the word guru is from two Sanskrit words, gu and ru. Gu means darkness or ignorance. Ru means dispelling it. So the work of the guru is not to teach you, but to remove the ignorance that is covering the knowledge that is already within you. So we are like a mirror that is dirty. Wipe away the dirt and you see the mirror shining forth. That is the work of the guru. And this is what my guru taught me. Or rather, he didn't teach me. And at the age of 36, I think, he called me and said, now you know everything. So I was taken aback. And I said, he said, now you know everything. There's only one thing left. And I asked him, what is that? The practice of whatever I have imparted to you. And even after he had died, whenever I had problems, he will appear in the dream. And he could read minds, he could foretell the future, he knew about the past. And when I was on Adam's Peak, at 2 o'clock in the morning, between being awake and asleep, I saw him sitting cross-legged, floating in the air and smiling at me. Because I was in trouble at that time. So that's how mystic masters from any religion, from any race, from any country, that's how they work. So because of the power to disperse darkness, the guru is thus named. Without a guru, you cannot gain enlightenment, because it is a chain that is linked right back to the original guru. So this is from one of the Hindu texts written in the first BC, I think. So in this dictionary it says, this is very unusual. When the soul casts no shadow, when the devil, Iblis, casts no shadow, the moment of inward peace as a symbol of all unpremeditated actions. Sounds very, very strange, but you know what it means? It proves Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, which is, if matter can be transformed into pure energy, and if you send it at the square of the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second, where would it go? So far, it's still a theory, but it's been proven by the great mystics. Their entire body is no more matter, they're pure energy. That's why they can be here, suddenly they can be somewhere else. Sounds like mambo jambo, isn't it? We are not interested in proving the theories. So the cinematic apparatus is how we tell stories by using cinematography or and whatever. So in Wayang Kulit, you can see that everything that is in cinema is already there. Okay? And even the title. See, if we have a film with the opening title, the opening title for Wayang Kulit is The Tree of Life, Pohon Beringin. It says Pohon, the tree of life. Why tree? Because the tree is a connection between the heavens and the earth compared to everything else. In Indonesia, they call it gunungan. Gunungan, mountainous. People go up the mountain to meditate and so on because of that point that draws the power of the universe down to the ground. So the enduring archetypes are the characters and the roles that they play, and it is actually for all time. So these are the archetypes. So the trickster is today. So let's look at the Wayang Kulit characters. They are archetypes, the heroine, the hero, the villain, and the jester. And where do we see them today? The South. Exactly the same characters. So go back and look at Darth Vader. Look at his teeth. Look at Darth Vader. Right?
Go back, we'll see it again.
See, his body is black. CP3O, the jester. Okay, semiotics is, according to Charles Peirce, made up of three: icons, indexes, and symbols. How you tell stories using signs. So signs do not function as signs, but they function as indexes. For instance, if I were to do this, you will not look at my finger, isn't it? You will look to where I'm pointing. So this is why we call it index finger. So in semiotic, we have the index. So what you see is actually a pointer to something else, but you have to do a little bit of thinking. So this kind of films are films that are very, very sincere. They want to involve you as the audience in the storytelling. Unlike the films of Professor Dato Dr. Razak Wali, who is a disgrace to Penang. So the shadowy in the surreal and gothic. Surreal is based on dreams. So just like the Aborigines, the Mahmari, the sculptures that they do, the Mahmari and Yahud, the sculptures that they make all comes from their dreams. And if they want to move, they have to wait for a dream so that the dream can tell them where they have to move to. It's not mambo jambo. Okay, I'm telling you from personal experience. So here you can see how films of the surreal and the gothic, they use lighting. So the shadow play comes to life only when it obstructs the light. See, there's an anomaly here, isn't it? And in horror movies, the use of shadow, light and shadow, to create the effect, and we are in a darkened area, makes it even more scary. And in the 1950s, of course, we were really, really scared because when we go home, the streets hardly have any lights. So I think that was more interesting than now. The streets are all lighted. So we have a genre called Gothic horror. You will have castles, huge buildings, dark alleyways, dark corridors, as compared to a horror splatter horror, where it's all about blood, like Friday the 13th. And I'm sure you know about German expressionism. There's a movement in art in Germany. While in Russia they were experimenting with editing, Germany was going into lighting, into architecture, and set design. So it emanated from there, and we saw gangster movies where these guys were mostly in shadows. Okay? These are from Chinese gangster movies. That's from Johnny Film. And in Kala Malam Bulan Mengambang, the same mood, lighting mode is being recreated, and from the other film noir, so you can see shadowy characters. Shadowy characters are in depth as to their character, what kind of people they are. So you see how shadows play an important role. So in my film, Silat Legenda, I used it as a positive index instead of negative. So they come into this old bookshop, old antique shop in Jalan Hang Jebat in Malacca, but I had it very dramatic. Why? Because it is foreshadowing, see the word shadow again, it's foreshadowing the book that they are going to discover, that is going to lead them to discover this magical box that is hidden on Gunung Ledak, the mountain straddling Johor and Malacca. And if you see shadows, they are negative indexes. They are like ghosts. Okay? And in the film No Country for Old Men, we see the sheriff looking like a cowboy, and he was lighted to show his shadow. That means there's something wrong with this guy. So it's an index. He thinks he's like the sheriff in cowboy movies. And in The Godfather, the first shot of Marlon Brando, as the camera pulls out, we see his eyes in shadow. So when you cannot see someone's eyes, you are not really sure what he is. Because the eyes are the mirror of the soul. And you see great actors acting, watch their eyes. If they feel things inside, you see it in their eyes. That's why most of Malaysian actors are so bad. They are not actors. I don't know what they are. And then the way the director uses lighting, for instance, if the face is dark one side, that means the dark side is coming to the fore. This person cannot be trusted. So watch movies, when they introduce two people, one person is lighted from the front, another person has got strange lighting, that means that guy is the villain. Okay? But don't tell your partner, otherwise they're going to bother you. And in the film from India, called Adomia, the environment is created to be dark to show the feeling of the character. So rather than have the character crying, they create a background that is like this. And in Majid Majid's film, Children of Paradise, normally this kind of mood is for horror movies. Horror movies, mostly blue light and a lot of silhouettes. But what happens if it's not a horror movie, but you're using the same convention? That means something is seriously wrong. And at the end, the boy dies. And moving right to left. Left to right is positive, right to left is negative. Watch any Hollywood movie, the army that's coming from the left will win, the army that's coming from the right will lose. You don't believe me? You never realize that? And when two guys are fighting, the guy who's standing on the left mostly is going to win. Alright? So you know who's going to win before they even fight. And in the film Dalam Botol, a local film, you can see the mother sitting. Look at the ground, figure and ground relationship. The background is dark. That means she's talking to the sun. The sun is now a transvestite. Actually, not a transvestite. He was gay and he thought his partner wanted him to be a woman, so he went for a sex change and got rejected by the boyfriend. So he comes dressed as a woman, and the mother, even though she's not yelling at him, but the background is telling us, and the line that is separating them, see the line in the cupboard, is telling us that she's listening, but she's not positive. She's not going to help him. So watch a movie, anything that is within the frame, or is saying something. We call that mise en scène. It's a French term, about from theater, what is in the frame. That means everything is about meaning. And this is both an element, this from the film called Songla, the kind of environment or what we call habitat of characters. So what kind of people will live in a place like this? Rats and so on, isn't it? So again we see blue surfacing, but these are not horror movies. So there are Freddy Krueger, so blue, black, mist, sharp point, silhouette. So be careful of this guy. And then in a film called Stop on Track, it's a German film, made last 2 years ago. This man is going to die. So look at the darkness that has been created, so that's how he feels. And there's a tree with no leaves that enhances. And this is from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Spielberg uses blue to create an ethereal feeling. And he sees the aliens as children. When children come around in a film, when children come around someone, that person has got a good heart. Same thing, you can have also animals coming around, because animals have a sixth sense. And there was a German film that I saw. There's a woman in the kitchen with a dog. Two men appeared behind the door, and the dog started growling. And in the end, what happens? These two people kill the dog and the woman. See, the dog is able to sense. So if you understand this, you'll find it easier to tell your story without using any dialogue. And this one is from Lion King. Look at how Scar is hunched, isn't it? As compared to Mufasa, who is like this. So there's always a binary opposite. So once you have binary opposites, that means you contrast one character with another character in their stature, you know who is a good guy and a bad guy. This goes for effective storytelling. Again, blue, there's a gangster movie. And this is from the local film called Nota, directed by Yasu Tanaka, who is in Malaysia now. It's set in Sarawak with an extreme long shot and a silhouette and this huge mountain which is foreboding, and it tells you something is seriously wrong. And this is not a deep sea, it's only up to this level. See, what you see is actually covering up for what is going to happen. In the end, the boatman gets killed. And look at the mist-like effect. That means something is seriously wrong here. But in this one, from a Spanish short film called One Too Many, it's very, very unusual. You see a curtain with dots. They represent stars. And when light is coming through the window, it is positive. So even though the man is in silhouette, but we see a lot of positive elements. For instance, the backstage is like what you see in a church. And then the candlestick is like a cross, isn't it? He has just lost his wife. His wife left him on a Sunday. Him and his son threw out all the TV set and their clothes out through the window and left in a huff. But God sent a Madonna to save them, and is preparing the room for her. So he doesn't realize it, but he and his son are going to be saved by this woman. So watch this movie, it's called One Too Many. It's on YouTube. It won an Academy Award. Many directors and cinematographers use paintings as a reference. So if you're familiar with a very famous painter called Edward Hopper in the 1940s in the US, you can see how the film Pennies from Heaven up there was based on one of his paintings called The Nighthawks. And again, one of his paintings of the Brooklyn Bridge came out in the film Manhattan by Woody Allen. And the Gothic element here, see the dark areas and so on, is based, this is from Barry Lyndon, directed by Kubrick, and it's based on the paintings of Vermeer. So let's see how it made its appearance in mainstream cinema. Is it still the same as the others? So Star Wars is a prime example of how the shadows made their way into mainstream cinema, and we did not know, we just accepted it. So this was very clever. And in the film Mulan by Disney, you can see Gothic elements. So once you have the moon, be very afraid. But in Malaysia, there are 1 or 2 directors who have a romantic scene with a full moon. If you have a full moon, it's a horror movie. That's the convention. You can't run away from that. And then the silhouette of the Hun and his raven also looks similar to him. And then he burns the flag. But notice, and then you see the binary opposite, they are contrasted. One guy is in silhouette, the other one full light on him. And the soldier is standing on the left. Who is going to win at the end of the film?
Guy on the left.
Oh, you guys are getting smart. Batman. This is his habitat. He can never remove his mask. Why? Because he's got a very deep psychological problem. So he lives in a Gothic world. He cannot live in a normal world unless, as what's the name of the character?
Bruce Wayne.
What?
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne. Yeah. So other aspects of the shadow. So if anyone wears a cowl and you cannot see his face, be very afraid. In the film Kabali, anybody saw Kabali? There was a young man wearing a cowl. The first time I saw him, okay, he's a bad guy. And true enough, at the end he shoots Kabali. But the censor board put Kabali was finally arrested by the police. We already saw it, didn't see him being killed, but we heard the gunshot after he went in. And in this Indonesian movie, this is very clever. He subverted it. So here are 2 good guys and a bad guy, isn't it? No, it's the other way around. 2 guys is their point of view that this guy is a bad guy. Actually, he's a good guy helping the kids to learn to read and write. But they are so steeped in their Islam, this movie, that when they look at someone who looks different from them, they have this perception. So you see this problem? This from the film Alangkah Lucunya Negara Ini by Daddy Mizwan. And anybody who wears dark glasses is a bad guy. Okay, watch the film The Rock. There are 4 guys. One of them wears dark glasses. I said he's a traitor. And true enough, at the end, he turns out to be the traitor. But do you think I cannot enjoy the movie? No, I enjoy it even more. And then Mr. Smith in The Matrix. How is it that in The Matrix, the good guys are also wearing glasses? Because they are not normal heroes. And the casting, see the difference between Mr. Smith and them? And even though their faces are also dark on one side, but we will root for them because the way they stand is in a triangle. A triangle is a very positive image. That's why superheroes stand in a triangle shape. And of course, what film is this?
Men in Black.
Men in Black. So these are good guys. Why? They choose Will Smith and who's this Joker? We identify them as good guys. Okay, that's very important. Last thing. Now, a very famous film called Tokyo Story. It's a film that you must see before you die. I've seen it 20 times. And I visited the place where they shot it, Onomichi, outside Hiroshima. And I went to this actual place, not this one, this is in Tokyo. Now, these films, these scenes are interspersed throughout the movie. They are not like this. It is so subtle, the comment that the director is making against the big city about how it changes people for the worse. That is why this is considered as one of the top 5 films in the world out of 100 films in 100 years chosen by the American Film Institute. And it's a 1.5-hour movie where for 1 hour 25 minutes people are just sitting and talking. How did it become one of the top 5? You have to see this movie because its theme is for all time. It's about how children, when they grow up, they change and the city changes them. Now, the binary opposite of this is the scenes in the village. So I went to this temple. It's still there, but it looks very different now. And the house that the father and mother live in looks like almost like a temple. I mean, visually, the director is telling us this couple, this old man and woman, are highly spiritual. And they visit their grown-up son and daughter-in-law in the city, but they have changed. They became very negative. So the the daughter-in-law, she is more like a daughter than their own daughter. And it's very clever the way he arranges the characters in the frame. You see a similarity and a continuity with the elderly couple. It's a very clever movie, but very difficult to analyze unless you are on a very advanced level. No. The director did his job well, that's why I can see. Okay, in Mulan, another aspect of the shadow is the reflection. When you have someone and you see the person's reflection, the person has got a psychological problem. So Gaston in Beauty and the Beast is in love with himself. So how can he be in love with beauty? So this is actually, from psychology, narcissism. Right? And then if you have a picture of someone and you see that person there, he's got major psychological problem.
It's a total trouble.
Politicians, leaders of countries normally have this. So they have a problem. I'm sure you have seen pictures of this locally. Mulan goes into the shrine and then she sees her reflection reflected all over the place. As a woman, she cannot succeed. She only succeeds as a man. Very strange, isn't it? But then when she's discovered, she has got to come back. Now, films are all about first follow the rule, then break the rule, but always come back to the rule. So students do not understand this. When you are studying up to diploma level, when you make a film, short film, follow the stupid rules. No handheld camera, no crossing of the line, no flashback. Otherwise, we cannot evaluate you. But once you have crossed that, you're going into degree level, that's where you can break all those rules because now you understand that. Similar in film. So, Mulan is a woman, then she breaks the rule, becomes a man. At the end, she becomes a woman again. And remember the one beautiful symbolic scene where the father who understands her says, when she failed at the matchmaking, says, look, that one flower has not bloomed yet. I'm sure when it blooms, it will be the most beautiful flower of them all. He's talking about his daughter. And at the end of the film, he's sitting in the same spot, and then you see that flower falling down. And then the captain comes. He's in love with her, but cannot bring himself to say. Who is his mentor? The emperor. Who is the mentor for Mulan? Is the woman. Where does the courage of Mulan come from? Not from a mother, from the father. The father's courage comes from the old woman. That's why there is a scene when she's crossing the road, she just closes her eyes and crosses the road. She's a warrior. So you see the element of genetics and psychology and whatever, even in an animation film. Opposite of the shadow, the ray of light. If you have a ray of light in a film, that person is highly spiritual. I made a short film in 1984. It's called Sang Kancil dan Monyet. I think most of you must have seen it. Wordlessly, I say that Sang Kancil is of a very high moral character. I have a ray of light in the jungle falling on him. And in any movie, remember The Last Samurai? Tom Cruise is sitting in a dark room, there's a window with a ray of light coming down. But he has a destiny. How do you show destiny? Because stars represent destiny. There's an American flag and the stars that we see. See how clever the production designer is? Even without the sky, you can show stars. So in a Spanish film called L'Oreal, there's this woman, see the light coming down, she is going to be enlightened. And finally she meets a woman who knew the husband, and now we see another light falling on the two of them. Both of them will be enlightened. So when it happens at the end of the movie, you are satisfied psychologically. You accept it. Now we are going into deeper waters. Many filmmakers make films about themselves, especially the ones who are not succeeding, who don't get recognition. So they go into the noir world. So Johnny Wicked film is a prime example. It's a 5.5-hour movie. I've seen it 6 times. I have never been bored. It almost went to Venice Film Festival for competition. Unfortunately, there was a flaw towards the end because the heroine did not turn up for the shoot, the actress. So anyway, Dr. Anwar Noarai, who made the film, is my mentor. He's the one who made me understand what film was actually about. That's why I dedicate my book to him. And the second guy is Muhammad Khalid, whose forte is parody. All his films are about making fun of the politicians, of people in the industry mostly, and about the entertainment industry. So Zombie Kampung Pisang is really making fun of all these people. But you have to more or less know who it is that he is making fun of. Then Hanyul, which will be shown on 24th November, it took about 10 years to conceptualize and make. It's based on Joseph Conrad's Almeyer's Folly. So the director, Almeyer is the director himself. He's stuck in this jungle of savages. He's in the industry and it's like he's in a jungle of savages. Why? Most of them do not understand what film is all about, and it's all about making money. So that's his expression. So they are using aesthetics and also philosophy that appear in the films. So in Johnny Wicked film, you see the hero and the villain, they are almost similar. So the director sees himself as, and he's saying, not of a good character, but I have to live in this world and try to make something out of it. So in his films, as you can see, how he likes the scenes. So that's the main character. That's how the director feels, the pain. And until he died, he was never recognized. So I have been writing about him, and I hope one of these days we can screen this film here 5.5 hours. So bring pillows. And it's also about the film industry and about his involvement. And what are the clues? The cinema screen at the back. In Bunuhan, you will also see screens, which means Bunuhan is also about the cinema industry, and Dave Syed is also talking about his own involvement and about how people are stabbing him in the back and so on. But of course, if you ask him, he'll never tell you and admit. So these are scenes from Johnny Wicked film, and that shot of two people, shadowy characters, is only 2 seconds on the screen. And it's posing the question, who actually is responsible for what the film industry is all about and why it is not succeeding in Malaysia? He's pointing his finger at the authorities. They are the culprits. See how he has done a rain scene and so on. The shadows of characters, the hidden hands that are manipulating things. See, very expressionistic. Two policemen running in the rain, and the policemen are also shadowy. You can't even trust the authorities. So the artist and his art are one, as proven by these few directors. So the art and the artist, according to Alex Gray, every work of art that does not cause God to be felt misses the true potential of art. Now, these people, they are actually very, very spiritual. They may not be religious. You don't see them praying 5 times a day, go to church or whatever, but they are highly spiritual, and it's not instinct, but they are being given. Jung says the collective unconscious. They're all taking from the same source. It is God who is actually the dalam, who is manipulating. It's a very big story behind this. We'll say that for another time. But what does Jung say? In spite of his function as a reservoir for human darkness, or perhaps even because of this, the shadow is the seed of creativity. So the shadow is not really negative. You have to understand the shadow to transcend it, and then you can use it for your own purpose. And that's what these filmmakers have done. So the traditional performers, the traditional performing arts, say the state of the dalam being one with his art, one in acting, one in will as long as he lives, one in involuntary action, one in hearing, one in seeing, one in speaking, that is indeed united with the absolute. So this is what in Zen philosophy they say, do not think, just do. Because once you say that if I do this, I will get pahala, I will get grace and so on, it doesn't work. You just do because you are told to do. So just shut up and do it, do not ask any question. That's why in Islam, we are never told the practitioner is not the beloved or the lover. It's always the slave. Muhammad the slave. But in Christianity, it's always about love, isn't it? But in Islam, it's about being a slave. Because only by being a true slave will you discover and go beyond to become the lover and meet the beloved. So the character of the shadow, as I said before, when the Iblis casts no shadow. So what is the Iblis? Big story here. See me personally. So the Ramayana, the stories have never changed through the centuries, but cinema has changed. The character has evolved from the archetypal character to the trickster hero. The hero who makes fun. The trickster was originally an archetype who just appears, creates a problem, runs away. But now he's come to the fore. So through the centuries, the Ramayana has never changed. That means we have to take on the qualities of Sri Rama, who is steadfast and stoic, and promotes the universal themes and ideals. And I think it was Vishnu who said, for as long as there are mountains and seas and rivers, the Ramayana will live on. So the Ramayana is the hero on his journey, which is what Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, said. Now the film, to close, the film Wayang, directed by Dr. Hatta Azhar Khan, was about a puppeteer and a young man who is blind, and he has a girl to manipulate the puppets, so he just recites. He is the new generation who cannot see, therefore his understanding is different from the dalam who can see. Now when the film was completed, I was called and for my opinion, and it ended differently from what the film finally came out. The dalam dies, and of course the young man is going to take over. So the camera is above looking down on him, God's eye view. That was the end of the film. And I asked the director, so what have you left with the audience? He didn't have an answer. Then he asked me, so what shall we do? I said, the dalam comes, the dalam goes. But Sri Rama continues to live on. You have to end with Sri Rama. And then he did something, and he was never expected by me and the director himself. He had a picture of Sri Rama in a loose shot. Then he slowly zoomed in to this shot. Now, which one is the puppet screen? Which one is the cinema screen? They have become one. So Wayang Kulit lives forever on the silver screen and is truly wayang. In Indonesia, wayang means something else. But we call it wayang, but of course now it's going to disappear. We call it film. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hassan. Now the problem is, do we sit on the left or on the right? Battle. Let the debater sit on the right. Okay. So you're noticing weird. Okay. To give a response to this very, very rich presentation from Hassan, we welcome Dr. Adrian Lee from USA.
Thank you. Thank you, Garen. I'll just use the mic. Is it okay if I don't use the mic? When I was told to take up the role of discussant, I said okay. And then when I saw the name Hassan Khalid, I started to think twice. How am I going to discuss this matter with Pak Hassan, as I so fondly called him? So I did two things. I sought for advice from my guru, Dr. Mustafa Piano. I asked him what to do, and after that I went to church. So Dr. Mu said, discuss what we have seen, criticize him, and ask him questions. Now I'm not going to say that I'm in a position to actually criticize Pak Hassan's work, because Pak Hassan was also a mentor who had guided me very much in my studies as well. Perhaps what I'll do tonight is I'll basically summarize slightly, put in some points which I'd like to discuss as well, and I'll put in some questions as well, and then the rest I'll leave to the floor to discuss and ask questions. From what you've seen, as Pak Hassan traced back the origins of cinema, Pak Hassan has stated how the Bangsawan and Sandiwara's Wayang Kulit had equipment similar to cinematic apparatuses. The usage of light and the white screen, for example, is one common characteristic used by cinema in the Wayang Kulit. Most interestingly, how Pak Hassan put it, for without light, there wouldn't be any form of performances. What is interesting is how light is instead used to project a form of darkness in order to discuss about issues which are mostly about goodness. So basically what we see here is light is being used to project darkness, to discuss about goodness, and is basically put in the form of the hero and the villain. To be slightly academic, I was told not to be academic at all tonight. What I've actually got was Pak Hassan's writing about the wayang and so forth, and he gave it to me last night, and I wrote a short article about it, and you see that I was sitting there, I was deleting so many things, because eventually what was presented tonight was basically very different from what I read in his paper. So Pak Hassan has thrown me off guard a bit.
He's the trickster hero.
I've learned my lesson. But basically, if I were to take this issue from a cultural studies perspective, I would basically see and ask questions as to what are the ideas and issues which are basically being contested within the platform of firstly Wayang Kulit, and secondly within the platform of cinema. This is because when I read through Pak Hassan's paper and looking at, sitting through his presentation tonight, I've seen a lot of discussions about the good and bad, light and darkness and so forth. But what I would like to actually see closer are what are the issues being discussed. For example, when we discuss about Johnny in film, for example, we are basically introduced to the problems within Malaysian cinema. Now, Pak Hassan is also very much into semiotics as well, and what I would have like to see is some discussions about how semiotics is basically applied deeper to discuss not just about the industry, but also the players involved within the industry as well. So perhaps later I would like to ask the question, what sorts of issues, be it political, society or economical, that were discussed within early Wayang Kulit performances first, and then about issues with Malaysian cinema and the Malaysian society as well. Eventually then Pak Hassan discussed about the birth of Malaysian cinema being a crossover from bangsawan and Persian influence opera troops. This basically set the groundwork for early Malaysian cinema, whereby we've seen the Indian directors coming in, Chinese money and Malay actors and so forth. Pak Hassan also talked about traditions and symbolisms, whereby the Wayang Kulit is a traditional art form steeped in Malay cosmology with deep religious and spiritual significance. Perhaps what I'd like to have heard more is how this spiritual significance are basically discussed and argued within the Wayang Kulit perspective as well, and how the usage of shadows basically relate to the symbols and signs which are within society. Basically, we've seen a lot of discussions about Hollywood films. A good angle to look at would be discussions about what is happening in Malaysia as well and what issues are being contested. Okay, my last point I'd like to make here is the many different characteristics that make modern cinema today, which is the usage of light, similarly within cinema and Wayang Kulit as well, the white canvas, the music and acting, basically all have roots from the Wayang Kulit and bangsawan. Even the usage of signs that are displayed either implicitly or explicitly contains its signifiers that are mysterious and full of symbolism and need to be properly understood and contextualized within the settings of a particular culture and community. So what I have to say here is no events or incidences can basically happen in a vacuum, for without a cause there can be no effect. So perhaps Pak Hassan would like to discuss a bit more about the issues which are in the film, which are basically driving the film. What we've seen is your discussion about filmmakers who basically do films which are a reflection of themselves, such as in film noir and so forth. Perhaps a deeper understanding or a deeper discussion about how shadows are used within such films to discuss pertinent issues as well. Perhaps for tonight, I think many are here to listen about the Wayang Kulit as well. Its origins, which we know has been influenced by many various cultures as well, basically influenced by Indian and Hindu influences, and the Ramayana, and discusses issues about Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the Bhagavad Gita as well. I think one issue which is basically bugging me tonight is, if this Wayang Kulit is so popular within our Malaysian society, why has its popularity ceased to exist? Or rather, literally moved into the shadows? As I was looking at your presentation, the first thing that came to mind was German expressionism and shadows as well. And then you touched on it and then I had to delete it. But yet, I think that a lot of what you have mentioned tonight is basically about how Wayang Kulit has its roots within Malaysian society, how it has basically been adopted into Hollywood films and so forth. Now, what I find really interesting, or rather is a question that has been asked to me last week. Should Malaysia be given the form of facilities, technological advanced technologies and so forth, and of course money as well, and using the Wayang Kulit and the usage of shadows and of course horror films with all its folklore and traditions and mythologies as well, do you think that Malaysian cinema will be on par with Hollywood films? Tough question, but I think this was actually posed to me by a fellow colleague as well. Since I'm meeting you tonight, I think that you are in a better position to answer this as well. So I think those are what I have for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Hassan?
Thank you. I don't think anybody should compete with Hollywood because their budgets are mega budgets. We can never compare them. And the kind of technicians that they have, we cannot These people, they know their stuff. When a cinematographer reads the script, he already knows how to shoot the film. But in Malaysia, the director has got to tell the cameraman how to shoot the film, style, and in terms of color. The art director also is got to say the same thing. So, film directors in Malaysia, like those film directors I mentioned, they have a big headache working with locals. The really good ones are in the advertising sector, and you cannot afford that. So they have to live with whatever they have. This is why Uwe, when he did Hanyut, he brought a cinematographer from Poland and an art director from Australia, first assistant director from England, because they knew how to do things. And he told me that he showed 3 photographs to the cinematographer. And he said, you have read the script? Which one of the style in these 3 photographs is the one that is best suited for this story? And the cinematographer just pointed to one. And that was exactly what the director had in mind. They know their stuff, but that's not how it happens in Malaysia. So we have a lot of good technicians. They are very good technically, but they don't understand that cinematography is narrative, editing is narrative, sound is narrative. So this is why I am able to lecture to cinematographers. I can handle a 35mm camera, 16mm. I started with Super 8 in 1967. But I'm not, an expert handling cameras. But I can tell you how to tell a story with visuals. I mentioned this now. Quite a number of cinematographers in Malaysia have learned from me about all these elements of symbolism. For instance, wearing dark glasses, having a character in silhouette as a negative index, I think they didn't know all this. The reason is there's no book in the world that's actually telling you this. I'm the only one in Malaysia who has been teaching this from 30 years ago. Why? Because I saw 300 films a year in the cinema when I was a bachelor, and I noted things down. And then I discovered this pattern. The same thing was being recycled. So in the Gestalt psychology of perception, a group of guys in 1912, they sat down, psychologists and artists, to see how is it that when you're confronted with an artwork, we can more or less understand the intent of the artist or the filmmaker. Then they had all these principles. But we need to know only 5. Proximity, continuity, similarity, closure, figure and ground relationship. This is applied for anything to do with visuals. Now in Hollywood, you don't have to tell them this. They already know it. Okay? So this is why sometimes they do things very instinctively. They know how to tell a story visually. We don't have them there. So let's forget about trying to be on par with Hollywood, compete, then you can never compete. The other thing you mentioned about the spiritual aspect, even though we consider Hollywood as people who are also capitalists, but the producers are actually the filmmakers, they know how to sell the film, they know who to act in the film so that it will draw an audience and so on, and they do it very well. But there's something missing, which is the understanding of the self. So, whatever job you are in, whatever occupation that you do, it should help you to discover your inner self. There was a film called Bulan Tertusuk Ilalang, directed by Garin Nugroho, very famous Indonesian director. He had a scene where a man is sweeping. He keeps appearing. He does nothing, he just sweeps. And then there's a young man who comes to learn classical music from an old master. So it's a binary opposition. The master doesn't care for this man. Why? Because the master knows he's never going to get classical music. Because of the way he dresses, visually you know he's not going to get it. But the guy who's sweeping, he knows nothing. His life is to be a sweeper, and he does it very well. That means he has discovered himself. So this is a difficult thing. So this spiritual aspect in Wayang Kulit which you had mentioned just now, that I did not really touch upon it. I knew our Ahmad, one of the most famous puppeteers. He and I were teaching in Aswara, the Arts and Culture and Heritage Academy, but we never sat down to have a talk. And strangely, one day, he was at the cafe. And I happened to sit at the same table with him. And you know what he said? Because you know, I'm going to tell you this. And he revealed quite a lot of the secrets behind what he does. 2 weeks later, he died. He didn't realize it, but yet, what's the word for it?
Premonition.
Pass it on, yeah. Pass it on. So that's how it is. And just to digress a bit, in 1994, the Kelantan government called the puppeteers in Kelantan and he told them, can you do away with the Ramayana? These are Hindu texts. Like now, even the name becomes sacrilegious. Can you imagine? So this idiocy was from the beginning of the past government. And of course they said no. They went back. They should have asked why. So I have been with puppeteers, young people and so on, and I learned from many masters. It's because the ancient way of learning is not like in the West. I teach you, then you demonstrate, and I will tell you whether you are right or wrong, and then I will give you the marks. That's not how it is in the traditional way. You follow me, you see what I do, and then you do it. It's an apprenticeship. Maybe a little bit of guide is given, but it's always done very informally. Because if the student is 100% committed to the master, like in Kathakali dance in India, when the student wants to learn from the master sits in the chair, the student lies on the ground and his hands touch the feet of the guru. So he's like saying, I am nothing, teach me. And you cannot waver, not even in your thinking. That means the master will only impart 50%, the other 50% will come spiritually. I can tell you this because it happened to me. A lot of things that I know that my master never taught me. But my master said, I'm giving you this, you have to practice it. What you get, I do not know. But when you get it, you have to ask me. And once I asked him a question that was of a very, very high level. He started telling me stories about the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, which means no way I'm going to answer that question. A few nights later, I heard the call to prayer for the dawn prayers, and I wanted to get up. Then I said, I'll get up in another 5 minutes. And suddenly I heard this voice from within me, telling me to get up. And then it gave me the answer to my question. The next day when I went to see my master and I told him, he said, yes. Because I was not supposed to hear from him. This is what we call haq. Haq means it's only for you, and you cannot even tell it to anybody else. Now, all of us have our master waiting for you. Whatever religion you are, whatever race you are, because in the Quran it says for every community we have given a guide. You have to find this guide. How do you find this guide? You search. But you don't get this guide because you are searching, but you have to make the effort to search. I had 13 masters, and ultimately I found my final master who made everything clear. And the master was staying not even a kilometer away from my house. And I had to learn from so many masters all over the place. Finally, I met him, and he was through a tree. So you see, a lot of things I cannot tell you because the Dalam himself does not impart this to his student. He just follows. he will just say a few words, and then sometime during dinner or tea or whatever, he will tell you the spiritual truths, but it's hidden. Like the poem I gave you just now. You have to decipher it. Otherwise, you cannot become a master. So there are a lot of things about this, but the shadow only lives because of the puppeteer. So here's this interesting thing about, do we have free will or is everything predestined? So these are the things that when they discuss, they don't talk about the Wayang Kulit. The whole idea of a Silat master, I learned 3 kinds of Silat from old masters, 2 kinds of Kung Fu and Judo. They actually do not want to teach you the martial arts. They want to teach you about yourself. And you know the Fi Sabilillah, the Holy War. The Holy War is not get the sword and go and kill the unbelievers. It's about fighting with your inner self, that shadow. That's what it's all about. So I brought it to cinema because Hollywood or filmmakers are actually using it, but they don't understand it. They only come to a certain level. But if you're not spiritually guided, if you're not enlightened, you cannot go beyond that level. Every religious text has got 7 levels of meaning. Today, they are only at the first level. If you see the movie called Rock Bro, that's screening now by Muhammad Khalid, the final scene is so heartbreaking. The rocker, who is now an old man, is dressed in a long robe, wears a skull cap. He has one final song to play with another guy he hasn't met for many years. They were in the same band. And then that guy says, "So now what are you?" "Oh, I'm selling religious books." "Ah, what about your early life as a rocker?" "Ah, that was the Zaman Jahiliyah, the era of ignorance." How can he say that? That means he has lost his way. So there are, it's a pity that I cannot really tell you this thing.
Let's open it up. Maybe if I can just have a first question. And actually to push something that Adrian said, because a lot of your analysis is based essentially on individual psychology, the symbolism thereof and so on. And I thought what Adrian was trying to push you to reflect on, does this symbolism, does the use of shadow and the apparatus of shadow, whether in Wayang or in cinema, reflect on not simply individual psychology, but wider societal questions? I mean, I think that's, because I think the hint going on is that Bangsawan, for example, in terms of its dramaturge, reflected upon the immediate society, the immediate cultural milieu, and so on, in a way that maybe your presentation only hinted at. I thought you hinted at it when you talked about Tokyo Story, where 1 hour and 25 minutes concerns people talking in a room, but that's contrasted with this urban scape outside, which is meant to be dysfunctional or at least disturbing. But beyond Jung's notion of the archetype and individual psychology, are there ways in which you think shadow can be used to reflect upon broader societal questions?
So when I was learning, practicing Sufism, I discovered that what is being said by Jung was already there. That the world, this is not it. This is just an indication of something else. So shadows is God's way, using stories, to say something about discovering Him. But you have to go from one level to another level, to another level, to another level. But most people get stuck here. And they cannot go beyond that. And what is interesting about cinema, and even the Wayang Kulit itself, is what Ingmar Bergman, the Swedish filmmaker, said. If you want to know what a filmmaker is saying, don't look at what he's saying, but look at how he's saying it. So all things that I was pointing out were indexes and symbols. It's hidden. So like the Sufi master, He does not tell you directly because he cannot tell you, he cannot show to you God is this. He can only allude to it. So cinema is all about illusion. So the reason my book is yellow in color is not because I'm a Brazil supporter, but cinema is spiritual. So the color yellow is a spiritual color. That's why the Hindu priests and so on, they are wearing yellow. The sannyasis, they were yellow. The Buddhists are wear yellow. Gold is yellow. So
That's why our bookshop is yellow as well.
oh, is it?
How spiritual are you?
Right.
Shall we open it up, Hassan? Let's. I mean, I'm sure people have been stimulated by what Hassan has said at very many levels. Questions, contributions, criticisms, and this is not the time to be shy. Otherwise, I'll start picking on people. No.
Then maybe question. And how about like there's so many things happening in our society nowadays, pushing that question further. So many things happening. Well, the artists have a role according to Pak Samad, the last one he came. Writers, authors do have a role to play to enlighten people, to actually encourage people to do things, but we are not quite sure if the Malaysian cinema, movie, filmmaking is actually doing that. Maybe I just didn't follow, or maybe they're not active enough. What's your comment on this?
According to the Hindus, this is Kali Yuga, the age of discord, deceit, corruption, and so on. So it's like a cycle. It takes a few thousand years. So we got to suffer with all these jokers.
For a few thousand years.
Yes.
Oh, no.
We have to suffer with these jokers for a couple of thousand years more probably. If you follow Malaysian cinema, you'll find that yes, they have been criticizing the government, but they don't do it directly. If you do it directly, it's either going to be censored or it will be banned. So Bangla Asia was banned by Namawi, and Jalan Pintas by Namron. They wanted 18 cuts because Najib's face was there. And then of course the association between something bad and the picture of GB. Of course, so writers, filmmakers, artists are all dangerous people. No government likes them. They're all over the world. Zhang Yimou's films, the famous Chinese filmmaker, have been banned, have been censored, prevented from going overseas and so on, but he never leaves his country. A true philosopher will never leave his country. One of the reasons why our cinema is not progressing like Singapore or Thailand or Indonesia is because the people who came to this land, Malay, Chinese, and Indians, they came from countries that where they were suffering. They did not have enough to eat. So they came to this land looking for their food. So they were from the working class. So you know, the working class, the mind is not very high level, isn't it? The philosophers never left their country. So according to Dr. Anwar Noor, right, he said, Tanah Malaysia tidak subur. This earth is not, it's not fertile. It does not create thinkers. That's why we don't have world-class people, okay, in the arts. And we only have one person who gone, our film was shown at a certain regard in Cannes. But Singapore, this guy is about 27 years old, Jun Feng or something. Ho Jun Feng, I think. I interviewed him on SO A-list. He's only 27 and his films come already. How is that possible? It's actually in our educational system. And you have to blame Anwar Ibrahim for that. When he was education minister, he took away English literature, replaced it with Malay literature. So, it went down. English literature is world class. During my time in school, we studied Shakespeare and we had a literary and debating society. Now they don't want thinkers. They want mediocre people, people who do not question. So that's why, but some filmmakers, and I can mention a few like Johan, James Lee, what do you call Chris Chong, Mama Khalid, Namron, K. Rahman, Uwe, Ishariya, they are criticizing and denying them, but it's all in the subtext. So if you understand subtext, then you can see what they are making fun of. Just give you one example. In Zombie Kampung Pisang, there's a scene where the zombies are running havoc, so everybody, the villagers run into the people's community hall and barricade themselves inside. Then the zombies come through the ceiling. So there's a table and the people are standing on the table and poking the zombies with sticks. Then along comes a woman with a Malaysian flag and it's got a long pole and they take it and they poke the zombie with it. If you look at that scene, it looks like the national monument. But what does it allude to? The index of what? The woman who's bringing it at that time, the chief secretary to the culture ministry was a woman. And the community hall is supposed to be Finas. Finas also wants to make patriotic films. So you have to read it like that. And then we had Jim Samsudin, who was a senator for 2 terms. He was supposed to help the film industry. Not a single meeting did he call all of us to. So that he can listen to our problem and he can raise it in parliament. So he has a character in the film, Sophie Khan, who plays the role of an attendant who sits at a table and is looking out the window and smiling. That's supposed to be him. That's how you read it. Unfortunately, our education system hasn't brought us to that level. So it's a problem. Because I come from that literary tradition where we understand subtext. Shakespeare uses simple words and yet they don't mean what they mean. For example, when Mark Antony went up to speak, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come here not to praise Caesar but to bury him. The good that men do is oft interred in their bones, their evil lives after them." Has he come to praise, condemn Caesar? No, he has come to praise Caesar, but he subverts it. And at the end, what happens? The people who are all condemning Caesar end up praising him, and then they look left and right, Brutus and Cassius are all gone. Even people who study film, PhDs, they don't understand. So in the films that you see like Rock Bro, an earlier film was Rock O. There's a scene where the Minister of Information is cutting the hair of the rocker on TV. This actually happened. Should I mention it? Okay. There was a second person.
No,
yes.
name names.
Name names? Yes. There was a second person who's having a lot of problems now, scandals. He was the Minister of Culture. And he said, and he came out in the newspapers, the rockers and the black metal guys are associating with the devil. And of course the media played it up. So of course God is giving him retribution now. So what happened was, the rockers were vilified. And they had to cut their hair, otherwise they cannot appear on TV. So, Awi, the rocker, he smilingly had his hair cut, but other rockers did not. And you know how many rockers suffered hardship? Because they did not want to cut their hair. Because if you cut your hair, how can you be a rocker? Then along comes Ella. That's why in Rock Bro, he has the name Ella, which he has never done before. He always has another name. So, Ella is the one who became mainstream as a rocker. And then there's a scene where K. Rahman is looking at the scene and he's having his hand like this. And he's saying, "What have you done to rock?" But if you look at the scene, it's like he's in love with her. So be very careful with Muhammad Khalid. What you see is not what you get. So So I wrote a very long piece, it's on the internet, about rock pro. What was the question?
You're such a ass.
Okay, I think
I thought you were the main names.
yeah, filmmakers are doing it, but you have to read it.
I remember not long before she died, I interviewed Yasmin for a piece that I was going to do, because a lot of people were trying to read off her films as sociological texts, in effect. And I remember she turned up at one of the annual Malaysian Studies conferences, and they were precisely trying to also almost make her into a sociologist or an anthropologist of Malay society. And she was very, very sharp and very, very short in her answer. I'm a storyteller, and you have to read my subtext. And if you choose to read it as a kind of sociological mirror of Malaysian society, that's one way of doing it. But in fact, she was far more interested in the kind of human relationships, the individual relationships, and how they panned out. And then you could read off those particular texts onto wider issues. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, in
The storyteller.
Valentine, the main character is a mute, deaf and mute Indian. So at a forum, she was asked, why did you choose an Indian who is deaf and dumb as your main character? And she said, it's because the Indians have the least voice in Malaysian society. And the latest film called Jagat, you can see that it's 1990s, 20 years after Dasar Ekonomi Baru, the new economic policy, it has not benefited the Indians. So the agenda was actually Malay from after 1969. So even in Ola Bola, you see the Chinese tapping rubber, which is very unusual because you always identify either the Indians or the Malays, isn't it? Which means he's also saying in 1980, 10 years after that, after Dasar Ekonomi Baru, that even the Chinese have not benefited. So you see how they are making criticisms, but you got to be quite smart. So in Ola Bola, Chiu Ping Wan is a very good friend of mine. He's a graduate of Beijing Film Academy, and he's such a simple person, but his films are incredible. You look at A Great Day, his first film, Wu Tiger, and one before that, also made The Journey. He's making a lot of criticism. And he is a supporter of the same, you can see the yellow balloons in The Journey. And when I spoke to him about his subtext, he just smiled, you can see, and then he started to reveal a lot of other things. But he will not do it publicly, because that's his secret. So mise-en-scène, or the arrangement of things within the frame, is the secret of the director that he will never reveal. That's why many directors don't like me, because I reveal their secrets, especially Google.
Mr. Hassan, what do you think of Namely as a filmmaker?
I was totally blown away with Nasi Lemak 2.0. It was originally supposed to be Nasi Lemak dan Teh O, Kopi O, but then when Persay had their name, he decided to make it 2.0 as to support. Now, his film is making fun of the Chinese, Malays and Indians. Okay, but and it's also about the film industry. That's why there's a scene where the Chinese are standing in a group, and then there are lights and so on, and they are being confronted with Malays and Chinese, the Malays holding a parang and so on. So it's the Malay Chinese community in film who are at odds with the mainstream, or mostly Malay. But he did it so well. And then he's making fun of MCA. There are 3 judges, and the head judge is listening to the other 2, but the moment they disagree with him, he turns and looks at them and they agree with him. And making the best nasi goreng is, Naomi is a film director who just came to the picture. How can he make a film that will appeal to all races? So he had a guy from China. Now, this is very clever. He put a communist on screen, and it was not censored by the censor board. Whereas Amir Muhammad made a film called The Last Communist. There were no communists in the film was banned. So, making the best nasi goreng is, how can I make a film that appeals to everybody? So he lost out on the Chinese because foreign films, that means this guy from China will make the nasi goreng, he makes it better, so he cannot compete with foreign films. So he goes to different communities, the Indian community, to learn Bollywood or Hollywood. Is that familiar? It's okay. But he finds out that they put everything in without any proper measurement. And so he said, cannot learn from that. He goes to the Malay family. But the Malay family more interested in having 4 wives. And even though the wives can speak Chinese and know Chinese poetry, and then it's more about sex. So he cannot learn from the Malays. Then he goes to the Chinese. And then he finds out that the Chinese are also making horror movies like Ghost. And then the Chinese also have a loss of identity. They have this Baba and Nyonya TV series. What was that? Only or something. So they have a man playing a woman. That means loss of identity, problem, personality problem. So cannot learn from all of that. So he has got to come up with his own recipe. Very clever, this guy. But of course, once he did the other one, Kara King, it didn't work very well. But I am wanting to see Bangladesh. Unfortunately, it got banned. He's a very clever guy. Now he's into rap, and you know, rap is like in theater they have this very aggressive thing. That's what it is. It's about the inside crying, and that's why in films like film noir, you have rape. It's him who's crying inside at night, scenes at night, and so on. That's how you tell stories visually. So from now, when you're watching movies, remember what I said. And then you are on your way to teaching yourself, and that's the best learning.
That's like a Sufi master. Ishmael?
I think this might just come out of my ignorance about Malaysian cinema and government encouragement or lack of encouragement, but I wanted to ask you whether, when you had mentioned the dominance of Hollywood, which of course is the case around the world, and the subtext in a lot of Malaysian independent films, I assume, that abound here. Who's the audience for these Malaysian films? As I said, this may just be that I'm ignorant. I don't know if there's a quota here, as there are in other countries, for content to combat things like Hollywood. Say, for example, in Canada on the radio, there's a 33% content requirement so that Canadian music can be played on the radio and it isn't all Justin Timberlake. Likewise, in Europe, for European cinema, of course, the reason European cinema is such a vibrant and incredibly inventive market is because of protectionist policies on the part of various European governments, I imagine, or I think I came to understand at some point. Is that the case in Malaysia? Because it seems that we're all watching the worst Hollywood movies in the cinemas here. It's not even the good. Hollywood produces some films. We can talk about as you mentioned quite rightly, the technical brilliance of a certain kind of narrative making that Hollywood has perfected, classical film, whatever. But we don't seem to be able to access other things. But as I said, is there a reason for that?
I'll talk to you about the target audience and also the quota. But first, I'd like to say that Hollywood writers today are even criticizing their own government. Iron Man 3, making fun of Hollywood, and also thumping their nose at George Bush, and Life of Pi, definitely. And recently I saw Jason Bourne. Why did the film end with a scene of Cleopatra's Needle? You have to look at the scene before that. The girl tells Jason, we can work together. Alright? Then he takes a tape recorder, puts it on the seat, and he goes out. She listens. And he recorded her telling her boss, we can get Jason Bourne on our side. And so I don't know, have you anybody seen Jason Bourne, the most recent one? He leaves that and walks off. And the last scene is Cleopatra's Needle. There's a signifier, up yours. That's how I read it. In Iron Man 3, remember there was a scene when his friend, the other Iron Man, is going to bomb somewhere in Afghanistan. Then he finds out it's all women sewing clothes in the cave. Right? He gets very confused. Then he takes selfies with him. Remember there's a scene where the Mandarin, who is actually not the bad guy, is being used by the bad guy because he looks like Osama bin Laden, because a bad guy has got to look like Osama bin Laden. So he's making fun of George Bush. They killed Osama bin Laden. So he is being handcuffed and taken by the police. Then the camera is inside Roman's Chinese theater where they had the Academy Awards. And as he's walking by, he has this euphoric look on his face. This is 5 minutes walk on the red carpet at Cannes as an actor, making fun of Hollywood. And then at the end, he blows up all the suits one by one, and he's saying to Hollywood, up yours, we don't need your Academy Awards. Very clever. But you see, if you don't understand hermeneutics, which is the art of analysis, not just analysis, you really can't get it. But you see, all this is quite arbitrary. On the third level of signification, which is very symbolic, it could be this way, it could be that way. Alright? But the filmmaker will never say, you were right. A good film can be interpreted in many ways. A bad film only one way, bad. Okay, about this quota system. In 1990, I was in Jakarta, and that was when the collapse of the Indonesian film industry. Why? Because America told them, if you don't allow our films to come in, because Sukarno did not allow all Hollywood films to come in, if you don't allow, we are not going to buy textiles from you. And you know how they are going to suffer if they don't buy textiles? So it was bringing their arm behind the back, and the Indonesian film industry collapsed until the 21st century, when the independent filmmakers came, the digital filmmakers came into the picture. And today it's very vibrant. Now, under AFTA, they have this trade agreement where a certain number of films have to come in. Now, they are very smart. Let's say Lord of the Rings, a huge box office hit. You want Lord of the Rings? Yes, we can give it to you. But you also have to take 3 or 4 films that are of lower quality. And that's why we see some really bad Hollywood movies in the cinemas. You have to buy, that's how it works. Now, I was told by the Deputy Chief Secretary to the Information Ministry, he said, on television, they have a quota. Otherwise, we have a problem with the foreign trade. We may not be allowed to sell certain things to... That's how it works all over the world. But if you look at Bollywood and if you look at Korea, you can see their films have gone into the international market and Hollywood is worried. That's why Hollywood, the biggest money earner is weapons for America, isn't it? Number 2 is entertainment. So they have to make sure that the government there supports the entertainment industry 100%. So in any trade agreement, buying American entertainment products are number 1 on the list. 100% support. So you can't help that. You have to go with it. On the audience side, the marketing manager of Golden Screen Cinema told me, the audience is king. They are the ones who buy the ticket. But today, I've been looking at the scene for a long time, and I say that today we have a really stupid audience for Malaysian cinema, but not for Chinese cinema. Chinese filmmakers in Malaysia, their films all cross million over. And some 6 million, 7 million, they are very smart. They co-produce with Singapore, and also it goes to Taiwan, also shown in mainland China. But they are very keeping very quiet, very low profile. But the Malay films are being hyped up that we are going to go to Hollywood, blah blah blah, and so on. Nothing works. Why? Because bad storytelling. And those that really make it are like the films of Yasmin that touch people's hearts. And you can study Malaysian society by watching her films. And she did say that I was the only one to be able to see things that nobody else ever saw. She mentioned it to someone, and someone told me. Now she did it well, that's why I was able to see it. And she doesn't know about semiotics, and she even bashed me at the very beginning. But then she began to understand what I was saying. So she never listened to me with the first 2 films. And I said, don't do this. And she was in hot soup, especially the scene where they pull the sarong, and there's Adit Iskandar standing wearing his underwear. I said, no, you can't do that. And she got flack, and I had to defend her on TV. Then from after Gubra onwards, when the film was finished, I was the only one to sit there and watch, and she wanted me to say there was anything risky there. So I had only problem with Walla. I said the ending doesn't work. Your graph goes down. Because she went from a long shot to an extreme long shot. So the graph goes down. I said you need an affection image. An affection image is the close-up. The close-up is the face. You have to go into the mind of the character. And that was missing. And she was so upset because she had never reshot. But she understood what I said. And she didn't make the change then. She made a change before that, and it worked. So it's Talentine is a beautiful movie. There are so many levels, and there's an element of Sufism there, especially in the Qawwali song. Qawwali music is highly Sufistic. So we have a problem with the audience today, and the audience now is a different kind of audience from before, from the 1950s. Now the audience, at least they have either secondary school education or diploma, and a lot were degrees. But why is their mentality so low? They still go films like the Metro Wealth and Razak Mohidin's films. This is ridiculous. I'm not saying that they shouldn't go and watch, but then they should also support the alternative cinema, so that the newer filmmakers who are coming in, they will have an audience and they can survive. Otherwise, what's going to happen? So now we have a catch-22 situation.
Ishmael, can I come back to you on that? What's your own thoughts about cultural protectionism at a national level in an age of globalization, of particularly online accessibility to a whole range of cultural products and so on? Because can I give the parallel example of the music scene? Because as you know, 10 years ago, I was quite deeply involved in the music scene. And the calls from quite senior and respected Malaysian musicians, M. Nasir, for example, in particular, for the Malaysian music scene, meaning the Malay music scene, to be protected, but not from Nashville or whatever, from Indonesia. And so there's a kind of protectionist logic that actually there's a kind of race to the bottom in which you put up walls, and yet the dynamics and the technology is moving completely in the opposite direction. We have accessibility and so on. The young indie bands who were coming through were criticizing this attitude and saying, we're living in a Nusantara, we actually cross borders very, very easily, we pick and choose as a kind of bricolage that we can pick and choose. And we don't think in terms of national music anymore. And I think even Yasmin didn't necessarily think of her films as being in any sense that the government would, or whoever would actually institutionalize such protection as national films. I mean, I think she felt, I mean, she had a wonderful following in Singapore, didn't she? And in fact, Singapore supported the showing of her films uncut, and they were only shown uncut here once she died. Do you remember? The whole Astro season. You have to die first in order to be respected and so on. Just one other thing, I want to really push what Hassan said. About 8 or 9 years ago, I wrote an article for Cinema Malaysia on the effects of free trade agreements on entertainment, on culture, and on cinema in particular, and the fears in the Korean United States free trade agreement that they were trying to negotiate was, it's absolutely true. American entertainment moguls were trying to leverage the free trade agreement to open up the Korean market, and Korean cinema makers, filmmakers, were really fearful. So now I've put a counter-argument to that. So in the face of Hollywood and the behemoth, but it's not just Hollywood, it's Bollywood, Hong Kongy wood, many, many woods. It's just the big predators versus the small cinemas. I'm not sure.
Isn't it also the nature of the regulator, though? In places like the United States, there's still there's very much an ability to criticize the government, obliquely perhaps in many instances, but not obliquely in many others without being persecuted, without being censored. Likewise in Canada, likewise in most of Europe. Perhaps we could cite Korea as a better example of freedom of speech, freedom of dramatic or artistic enterprise. Hong Kong even since '97. So I think, of course, it has to be a model that works per country. And I was just curious about that regulation, protection regulation in Malaysia. I also think that the media have to, it's different kinds of mediums, whether it's music versus cinema. So.
Just to share a bit about what I know. For Malaysian films, we always say that the audience is very segmented, as segmented as the Malaysian society is. But I believe that there are only two types of Malaysian audiences, audiences for Malaysian films. One is audiences within Malaysia, and the second will be the audiences which are overseas. Let me explain. Films that make it overseas don't make it in Malaysia. For example, case in point, Yasmin's films were all successful overseas. Her films travel all around the world. I managed to watch Mualaf in Melbourne, and the hall was packed. It was packed to the brim and people couldn't come in. But when it was shown in Malaysia, people were not really interested. They weren't really interested in what the issues were and so forth. The same goes for the films which were made by the digital filmmakers or the indie filmmakers as well. Their films travel all around the world, winning awards all around the world. But when it comes back to Malaysia, when I show it to the students, they say, so boring. I don't understand what's going on. Many fail to look beyond what Pak Hassan is talking about, looking beyond the meaning or the subtext which are within the films. Now, many of these films actually criticize very critically about, not just about the government, but about society as well. What is society doing, what is society failing to do, and so forth. It is just that we are very much indoctrinated by the idea of capitalism, whereby I go to the cinema, I pay 15 ringgit, I must be entertained. I must go with a good feeling that after I watch it, oh, the hero doesn't die. The hero survives, the hero, big factory explosion and all that, and everyone starts crying, and somehow the hero walks out without a single burn on the face. But Yasmin comes out with a film whereby the main character actually, we don't know whether he dies or he doesn't die, because eventually he calls on the phone as well. And then people say, hiya, so hard to understand. Right? But when it's shown overseas, people grasp it. And I believe that it goes back to what Pak Hassan says as well, is the education as well. We're not taught to look beyond what is there, to read between the lines, to read the text, beyond the text as well. So that's why I believe that in Malaysia, for Malaysian films, there are two types of audiences, one within Malaysia and one outside of Malaysia. Going in terms of protectionism and so forth, we have a lot of policies. The latest being the DASA Industry Creative National Industry Creative something, right? Which I'm actually working on, but I can't remember the policy name. Shows how impactful it is. Now what is happening is, again in Malaysia, a select few are getting the benefits, which is basically reflective of what is going on in society as well. Many of these filmmakers actually have gotten fed up and they said, I asked for money and they said, my film is not Malaysian. And then they asked, what is Malaysian? Oh, it's not a Malay film, right? So what these people have done is then they go to Hong Kong, for example, and say, I have this script. They go to Beijing and say, I have this script. Are you interested to co-produce? And this small company, Focus Films, for example, gives them money to produce their films. And these films then go travel all around the world and they're recognized as Malaysian films. But when they come back to Malaysia, they're told that no, this is not Malaysian film. Because of certain policies such as
I think there's a language policy, which might or might not be used anymore, whereby 70% of the language used in the film has to be Malay. So how exactly do we count 70% in the film? So such actions are actually in many ways preventing many filmmakers from actually making their films within Malaysia as well. And I believe that back then there were also calls for certain number of scenes that must be shot in Malaysia. You can't show too much overseas, you can't show Caucasians too much, you can't show people with long hair on screen as well. and so many other forms of restrictions as well. So many actually chose to take their films, their ideas, and go overseas as well. And notwithstanding the fact that many filmmakers actually had to take their scripts and present it to FINAS first. And FINAS says, no, I want this out and all that, and then gives them back. And then only they're allowed to shoot. And after they've shot the film, they then have to show it to the censorship board. And the censorship board say, oh no, I don't think this is right and all that. And at the end of the day, we get two people wanting to kiss, and then after that, we see KLCC, for example. So no one knows actually what has happened. Right? So what else we see is there was a scheme wajib tayang. I'm not sure what you call it in English. The scheme wajib tayang, whereby cinemas or cinema chains are required to show a film for about 14 days, if I'm not wrong. 14 days in a row. If it's not making money, they still have to continue showing the film. And it has to be at all times. For example, the first film is at 12, 3, 6, and 9. So it has to come on at that time. So if many Malaysians, again, as I mentioned, including myself as well, when we pay the hard-earned ringgits and so forth, and we go and watch, would I want to watch Life of Pi, or would I want to watch Hantu Ponceng, for example? And then you think, naturally we want to go for something which is supposedly international and so forth. So I think those are the few policies and things which are going on in the Malaysian film industry.
Thanks.